we ready for the jury?
No, Judge, we can approach.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's bring our jurors back in. All right, members of the jury, here's the situation the state has arrested. I believe that the defense is going to put on a case. We'll hear from one more witness, and then
We're going to use an OR.
we'll excuse you for the day. We'll probably stay and deal with some legal issues, but I just wanted you to know you have to hang in there for one more witness for today, okay? So I think it's helpful for you to know how long you have to hang in there. All right. The state having arrested, what says the defense?
Teresa. At this time, the defense will call Dr. Daniel Buffington to the stand.
Sorry. Stand next to me. Raise your right hand. Face clerk. Take the oath. Answer out loud, please.
Do you swear or affirm the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Right this way. Go ahead and have a seat.
Yes, sir. All right, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Can you please turn to the jury and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Dr. Daniel E. Buffington.
All right, and where are you currently employed?
I work at Clinical Pharmacology Services, which is a specialty practice in Tampa that performs clinical pharmacology and toxicology services. I'm also on faculty at the University of South Florida's Colleges of Medicine and Pharmacy, and also work for the United States government for Medicare and Medicaid services as a medication safety specialist.
And can you please tell the jury a little bit about your educational background?
Yes, I did my undergraduate studies at the University of South Florida here in Tampa, native of the area, and then did a doctorate of pharmacy, or a PharmD degree, at Mercer University in Atlanta, Georgia. Following that, I did a postgraduate residency and fellowship training in clinical pharmacology at Emory University, also in Atlanta. And then following that, completed an MBA with a healthcare focus from Mercer.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about what's your daily occupation? What do you do daily?
So it
Your
varies
practice.
significantly. I manage the clinical pharmacology practice in Tampa. In that practice, we see patients. They're referred by primary care specialists, health plans, law enforcement, the court, referred for evaluation of their medication regimen. So we call it medication therapy management. It's where we provide a comprehensive review of your individual medications, your medical conditions, identify potentials for improving therapy, improving safety. There could be drug interactions. There could be drug metabolism complications. In addition, I serve as a principal investigator for clinical trials, typically products that are in research development 2 to 3, 4 years before FDA review and approval. And in addition to that, provide drug information services for health systems and practices on a clinical basis, where it would be telephonic, or it could also be for law enforcement, medical examiners, and in that side, or the court, and we would consider that forensic, something related to law.
And have you ever testified as an expert in the areas that you're going to be giving opinions on today?
Multiple times.
Okay. And have you testified for both the state and the defense?
Yes.
All right. And do you know approximately the percentages or how many times?
I don't. It's probably over 250, 300 times since the early 1990s when I first started, as overlapping with my academic activities. And it's a pendulum swing. At any point in time, you may have more state or prosecutor, and other times you may have more defense. They include state, federal. It's surprising where pharmacology finds its way into the court for custody issues, for estate settlements, but for criminal issues, a wide medical malpractice, a wide variety.
Okay. And are you equally available to both state or defense if they were to call you?
Yes, I'll review a case on its own merit and let the attorneys know what the facts are of the case for their review. They're reaching out at that point to an expert to understand the facts of the case.
Okay. And you were reached out to, I don't know if that sounds right, to give an opinion in this particular case. Did you look at anything before coming up with an opinion?
I did, multiple records.
All right. And what were the records that you looked at?
The records included everything from videos to police reports to other transcripts of depositions of other experts and witnesses, photos, laboratory reports, autopsy reports, a wide variety.
Okay, and I want to, did you prepare a document that can assist you in relaying the information that you reviewed and your ultimate opinions to help with the jury?
I do. And in this case, as I do typically, it's my work product, so it's a summary of my review of the case as well as my opinions and findings.
Okay. And at this time, permission to show the jury the PowerPoint that will aid the expert in explaining his testimony. Thank you.
Can I relocate, Your Honor? You may.
All right, and you will let us know when you need us to move to the next slide. I don't have a special clicker.
Yes, ma'am. So this is just the title slide, which is a who are the various parties and markers for our record-keeping purposes. Next slide.
Okay, and the next slide. So after looking at all of the information that you were provided, did you come up with some background and some observations?
I did.
All right, and what were those?
So in evaluating a case, you have to identify what factors may become the basis for your opinion. So it could be laboratory reports, it could be clinical observations of individuals' behaviors, actions, appearance. And in doing that, try to describe the event as a baseline, and then what are your pertinent findings and medical records that may be related to those.
Okay. And did you have pertinent findings and facts that you needed and that you used to come up with your ultimate opinion?
I did.
All right, and if you can... So, Dr. Buffington, after a review of all of the information that you were provided, what were some of the key facts that you determined necessary to come up with your ultimate opinion in this case?
So there were laboratory reports and there were autopsy results that were pertinent to understanding the baseline for my being an expert in the case, something pharmacology and toxicology related. To then look at the circumstances that were in the case included going back to look at the videos and the other statements to build a sequence of events. And that's what I have on this slide.
Okay, and can you briefly go through that with the jury, or what were some of those things that you thought that were important?
Yes. So we'll ultimately be speaking to the substance and the substances, for that matter, that were identified in his system. But these were points of time, and that was that the event took place on 7/19 of 2018 at the Circle A gas station located at the corner of Sunset Point Road and Douglas Avenue in Clearwater, Florida. Next was not the parking of the vehicle in the space from my perspective, it was the observations of Marquise, and that started at 3:30:06, at which time Mr. McLaughlin exited the Circle A front door and observed a verbal discussion or altercation between Brittany Jacobs and Michael Drejka. Which included at that juncture no physical contact between either Jacobs or Drejka, and the videos affirmed that there was none. The next observation was that at 3:30:12,
And I'm going to stop you for a second. What's the importance of the time for you? Is the time important for you?
It is, because I'm looking at reactions, I'm looking at decisions or judgments. When we go back to look, whether you're looking at a DUI case and an alcohol, we don't just look at one thing. You don't look at a lab result. You look at the lab result in context with observations. So when you do a field sobriety test, it's the equivalent of looking at your cognitive, your decision-making, your fine motor control. So you're putting those two together, and you're saying that these are symptoms that are consistent with impairment, and you look at a drug level or an alcohol level. In this case, that's what we have. We have blood levels that are obtained from his blood at autopsy, and then there are observations at these interval times, and then looking to see if those effects or symptoms or behaviors or judgments are consistent with the impairment, the types of effects you would see from those substances or not.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You can go on.
No problem. So the next one is at 3:30:12, at which time, as he stepped out the door, the next action was about 8 to 10, approximately 9 steps down the sidewalk, at which point he did not engage with either Ms. Jacobs or Mr. Drejka to discern the circumstances, and then directly assaulted Mr. Drejka by blindsiding and forcibly knocking him to the ground, which then taking 2 additional steps towards Mr. Drejka, who was on the ground. So at that juncture, that really seems to be a decision point. He stepped forward, and then it wasn't until the weapon was pulled from his possession that he took 2 steps backwards.
And that was after the push, correct? The steps forward,
It was clearly after, based on the video.
and then a step back after when the firearm was pulled out.
That is correct.
Okay, you can go on.
So then at 3:30:17, Mr. McLaughlin received a single gunshot wound to the left chest, which perforated his lungs and heart. He then left Ms. Jacobs and the children and ran back into the convenience store and kneeled down and fell to the ground. And next was police responded to the Circle A gas station, and McLaughlin was taken to Morton Plant Hospital and expired at the emergency department there. And then after that, we have the laboratory evidence, which is the autopsy toxicology results, which are the reason for my evaluation and testimony.
Okay, and so it's fair to say that reviewing the autopsy was something critical in you coming up with your ultimate opinion.
That is correct.
Okay, next slide, please.
So the next is the autopsy summary, which, yes, should appear. It did. It took place the next day, the following on 7/20/18 at approximately 10 a.m. by Dr. Noel Palma. At that point, it was identified that Marquise was a 28-year-old male, 6'1", 205 pounds. There were 4 key findings for the autopsy: a penetrating gunshot wound to the chest, perforation of lungs and heart, fracture of the ribs, and hemothorax. There were 2 pertinent findings to the toxicology results, and they were MDMA and also a separate substance, MDA. And we'll discuss those in greater detail. The cause of death, medical examiners typically result their findings with cause and manner, and the cause of death was gunshot wound to the chest, and the manner was homicide.
And are you aware if Mr. McLaughlin's blood was sent out for further testing somewhere else?
It was. I have those results as well. So there was, in the next slide that we'll cover, which is, there we go, a summary of the laboratory findings. They were performed at Pinpoint Testing, which is a forensics lab located in Little Rock, Arkansas, a very well-respected lab. And it was findings. When you look at laboratory results, you have to look at 2 types. One is qualitative, which is the equivalent of a dipstick in a solution that gives you a positive or a negative. At that juncture, it's imperative to say we don't truly know if that's affirmed or confirmed. We think there's something similar to, closely similar, and it's a reaction, a chemical reaction. When you have those, the next logical step, as was done here and appropriately, was a quantitative. First was qual, second is quantitative. In a quantitative test, you use a much higher level of instrumentation in the laboratory, and it's so precise that it would be, for an analogy for us, it would be like our fingerprints in DNA. It actually positively affirms which substance was present, but it also is able to measure and quantify the amount that's present. Where there were 2 substances, MDMA, and it was present at 459.5 nanograms per mil. Most of the literature that we see surrounding MDMA uses a different set of measures, and it uses that would be milligrams per liter. So a 459.5 nanograms per mil would be the equivalent in different units to 0.4595 milligrams per liter. So when we look at other literature and compare, how do we say if this is a high or low level? It's important to properly disclose those units. And then the MDMA was at 37.6 nanograms per mil, or converted to milligrams per liter, 0.376 milligrams per liter.
So there was some testimony about the MDMA and then MDA and whether or not those are actually 2 separate substances or one substance with a metabolite. Can you explain that to the jury, how that works?
Yes, so from a clinical perspective, when we have a patient in our practices, when we have a patient in an emergency department, if you have a patient in an autopsy result, it's important to understand what the individual substances identified and then try to make decisions or interpretations around those. In this particular case, both are substances that are listed as controlled substance analogs, meaning something that's already been made officially a controlled Schedule I substance because of its similarity to other already established Schedule I substances.
Let me
that are-
stop you for a second. What are some other similarly situated Scheduled I substances?
So methamphetamine would be one, mescaline, there's a variety of other illicit psychedelic and CNS, central nervous system stimulants that are also Schedule Is. So with that, both of these are Schedule Is. Now, to clarify, in the natural process, when you absorb, when you take, and let's start off with, there is no standardization, there is no commercial production for illicit recreational drug use, so you don't know what you're going to get when you take a particular substance like this. In that, there are some products that are used for all the same endpoint, meaning the person's trying to achieve an effect, like a psychedelic episode. In that, they may in fact have a product that is MDA as the actual substance. It could also be, and it would look like in this case, that it could be MDMA, and as the drug MDMA goes through the body, goes through the liver, the filter and sort of trash can for the body that breaks down substances, foods, medications, and others, that it's a byproduct. And when the original parent chemical is broken apart in metabolism through different pathways, we call those byproducts metabolites. So MDMA is clearly a known metabolite to MDMA, MDA to MDMA.
So tell me a little bit more about MDMA, its interactions, its symptoms, and again, I'm not as well versed in it, but you can explain that.
Sure. So next slide, please. The one before that. Okay. So just so you understand, in that metabolism process, when we use the word controlled substance analogs, what these compare to, if you look at the core chemical structure, substantially similar chemical component, the core of this medication is methamphetamine. So in the byproduct, in the byprocess, metabolism process, they have similar effects. Are they identical drugs? Absolutely not. But they each have significant adverse side effects, each to their own, including MDA. So in this, it's just to show how structurally similar. Methamphetamine only adds a dioxy group on the far left with the two oxygens to become methylene dioxymethamphetamine, and that's the parent drug we're discussing today. And then in the metabolism process, you see one shift with the methyl group in red on the bottom that converts it from the one drug to the other. And in fact, MDA has worse psychiatric and neurobehavioral side effects than does MDMA, the parent. So this plays into understanding the pharmacology and the potential side effects of these medications is how long are these, how are they produced, how long are they in the system, and then many other characteristics to how long the person is taking them back to back. But even on a single dose, you can have any of these aberrant side effects.
Okay. And to be clear, you can't give an opinion as to when Mr. McLaughlin may have taken it at a specific time.
No, not to a specific time or to a specific frequency. From a single point like this, what we do know is there's two substances in his body. Upon interpretation, it does look like appropriate ratios, meaning the larger amount of MDMA to the smaller amount of MDA, to presume or interpret that it was the parent drug being metabolized into the second drug.
And not two separate drugs.
That would be my interpretation based on this and having seen many cases like this in the past. I would make the call that this is one drug being metabolized. Then you have to look, and as you stated, I can't state exact times, but what we can start to infer is this value, the 495 for 59, is substantially high. Yes, there are reported cases of patients having 750, 1,000, and even higher. That's because when you take something illicitly, you have no idea the amount or the volume that you're going to get in a particular substance. The more important part of this discussion is at what level, low levels, do we start to see the adverse side effects, not what's a maximum that we see deaths. So you can have deaths and lethal outcomes from these, and those would be expected at higher. And we can explain the types of ways that MDMA causes a death. But it would be disingenuous or inappropriate to say that this only causes one type of reaction. This is a very dangerous drug with a wide variety of side effects and with all illicit substances, unpredictable outcomes.
Okay. Should we move on to the next slide?
Yes.
So,
So this would be a very similar slide that I would call a monograph. So in drug information and pharmacology, we look through substances and we try to coalesce the best findings in the industry and the literature from different studies, different sources that help us understand the pharmacologic properties, meaning how the body handles the drug, but also the pharmacologic effects, the effects the drug has on the body. And in doing that, this is a summary from multiple articles. It is a central nervous system stimulant. It's related to the amphetamines and the benzodioxols. It's structurally related to a hallucinogen called mescaline. It does have entactogenic or empathogen properties. So
what does that mean?
That means that it can elicit emotion. So in a psychedelic episode with, whether it's MDMA or LSD or other medications, any of the psychedelics, that's what an individual is attempting to achieve, a detachment and a sense of emotional euphoria. The problem with that is that's not a guarantee that that's the effect that you're going to get, and we see a wide range of effects. And we understand why. They affect numerous chemicals in the brain that we refer to as neurotransmitters. Those are chemicals that we produce naturally, but when you take these medications alone or in combination, you have a disruption in those neurotransmitters. We know that the drug causes its effects for about 8 to 10 hours. You heard the term half-life. It's important to explain the whole process. There's half-life of effect and duration of effect, and then there's half-life, meaning how long it takes when you take a substance to be cleared from the body. To be cleared from the body, as we heard, is about 6 to 10, 7 to 9, depending upon the reference ranges that you're pulling your sources from, means that in about 7 to 9 hours, you drop whatever that dose produced in your bloodstream by half. And then another half-life, another 7 to 9, it drops by another half. So if you go to 50, 25, 12.5, 6.25, you begin to see that from a pharmacologist perspective, we say within about 4 or 5 half-lives, a drug is cleared from the body. Well, that's not the only important issue here. The important issue here is how long does the drug have effect? So if it's something that we might have seen a day or two in duration, the question is, when was it taken? And it's putting these pieces together in totality. The value of 459 of the parent drug, MDMA, is a substantial amount of the medication. There are trials happening right now in the United States where psychiatrists who started this pre-clinical trials in the 70s, 60s, and 70s using multiple psychedelic agents to assist in therapy to help patients relax during psychotherapy and to reach to the depths of levels like with PTSD, and that's where the research is now. So in PTSD, this isn't a treatment. If you think of an anesthetic agent for a painful procedure, this is like a mental anesthetic for psychotherapy when you're attempting to identify and reach down to what is the core issue of post-traumatic stress. So it's only something that would be given in the office. It's only something that would be given in a clinical controlled setting, in a safe environment where you could react and take care of the patient. The issue here is the levels of what are used in clinical practice are a fraction of what this would be. So this is well beyond, I would agree, this is recreational use. It doesn't have to be in the thousands. We start to see if this level was, you can see in the middle, 75 milligrams. I wish I had a pointer as well. Can I stand up?
Sure. Well, permission, you're on permission for the witness to stand.
Okay.
Yes.
So in this discussion here of half-life, while the half-life's 5 to 9 hours, the duration of effect is 8 to 10. So if a level is still substantially high, and the person is functioning, it's an indication that it was relatively recent. And I think everyone in this case has agreed that it's reflective of recent use. The PTSD doses that are used in clinical trial stages now are ranging from 12.5 milligrams to 30 to 75 to 125. In those, what we know is, for the researchers who have documented, when you give a 75 milligram dose, it produces, on average, a 0.13 milligrams per liter serum concentration. So a 0.13 in comparison to what was identified post-mortem was 0.459. So you can see that even in the doses that are being attempted to use in controlled settings are a fraction of the end serum concentration. than what was identified in this case. The side effects differ in intensity. There's a clinical term or a chemistry term called chirality and racemic mixtures. Same chemical structure, one part of it can turn left, the other part, same number of carbons and hydrogens, can turn to the opposite side. What we know is, in many medications, direction that chemical turns can produce different intensities. We see the same thing here. So when you put something in your mouth, you can't predict what you're going to get. The issue here, too, is there's a lot of drug interactions with other medications. The CYP 2D6 is one of the most common drug metabolism pathways, so other foods and substances that go in can have drug interactions. In this particular case, it's important to note there are acute effects, and they are not limited to being called a love drug. Matter of fact, there's articles that are referred to as love drug versus thug drug. And in the process, if you look at what's noted, you can have euphoria and emotional instability, but you don't predict the direction it's going to go. It's emotions unleashed. Impulsivity, the poor judgment about something that's you're going to do, or a decision, or an action. Agitation, disorientation, confusion, paranoia, anxiety, aggression, psychedelic or hallucination effects, reckless behaviors, hyperactivity. These are not something I made up. These come from the national and international monographs on this particular medication. So it's not appropriate to stand and tell you that it is just a touchy-feely medication. Many people may use it to achieve that. Many people may get that effect. But with that comes serious, and these don't require overdosage. These are at normal doses. So even at the doses that are used in clinical trials, there's adverse side effects observed, and patients have to be monitored in clinical practice settings because they can have any direction of outcome. There's another issue, and that is long-lasting. If I explained to you or had pictures of the chemicals, what happens is MDMA comes into the brain, and I think we do have one coming up, but there's long-lasting effects, meaning after you've taken the drug, many of us may think of alcohol like a 0.08 grams per deciliter level that we hear is the baseline for a charge of DUI. And we think at 0.08, you're impaired. But the other issue is when we see that medication level or that alcohol level dissipate, we think the effects are gone. But that's not the case with MDMA. There's longer lasting effects, and they don't simply require that you are chronically using the medication. That with or without cessation, impaired decision-making, impulsivity. So think of these as enhanced versions of what you see at the acute or regular dose, even at longer-term effects. And again, that's worsened by chronic or repeated exposure because of the damage it causes in the brain.
Now, talking about the brain, you mentioned the term neurotransmitter disruption. Did I hear you say that? Explain that for the jury.
So,
next slide, please.
Next slide. So when we look at the brain, it's made up of a series or a chain of cells called neurons. And those neurons in that chain link send a signal from one down the chain to the other, and that's how impulses travel back and forth. Collectively, what happens between each of those and which chemicals are released between those two junctures, like you see in the bottom in the gray, we call that the synaptic cleft or junction. What happens is, as those levels change, the body already makes serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and a variety of others. These are three that MDMA affects. When the body makes those normally, when we give a medication for depression, anxiety, we're trying to artificially regulate up or down some of those neurotransmitter balances and effects. When you take an illicit substance like this, it's doing that too. The problem that's notorious for MDMA is it causes a dumping of serotonin. So that's why, in compared to meth, you might see an effect and say, well, I see somebody who looks relaxed for a moment, then somebody who is looking depressed, then somebody who is looking agitated. What happens is you're dumping the serotonin, and then you're reducing and inhibiting the rest of these neurotransmitters. And when you're doing not one, but two, but three, that's where the unpredictability comes in. You're affecting three naturally produced neurotransmitters with MDMA function.
Now, next slide.
So this comes back to the understanding the pharmacology. Remember I said when MDMA goes through the liver, it gets metabolized, and MDA is a byproduct or metabolite. It too has an effect. So now we have, but for taking the first drug, 2 active chemical structures that are inducing effects on the brain. As we see in the top one, MDMA's effects, duration of effects, are 8 to 10 hours. You'll find some articles as short as 4 to 6. You'll find some that are longer on average, and there's numerous. When we build the monographs and build our clinical materials, we try to look at the span. And so 8 to 10 hours would mean that if you took it 8 to 10 hours prior, you're still having effects. But to still have a value of 459, if you say, but what if the effect has worn off and we're just picking up the MDMA, would be an extremely excessive amount, not typical of a positive, sustainable life. There are overdoses. And in addition to that, the MDA is persisting longer. So its half-life and its duration of effect is longer. And the psychiatric and psychedelic and neurobehavioral side effects with MDA are worse than its parent. So each of us are going to respond differently. It's a Pandora's box of effects. We saw positive and negatives. It is an emotional release, an empathogen by characteristic, a psychedelic. There's just no predictability on the outcome. So in a case like this, like if we looked at alcohol, we'd say what physical symptoms or behaviors would be consistent with impairment. We would do the same with this. If these are the substances identified in the system, then we would look and say, what can we interpret? Because remember, this isn't post-mortem. We're trying to say, what can we infer from this ante-mortem or pre-death?
And so talk to me, and you kind of talked about them throughout, but the neurologic side effects that are consistent with MDMA and MDA. Next slide, please.
Correct. So we saw a wide variety in that prior monograph of acute and long-term effects on behavior and psychiatric status. The effects that I saw consistent in this case with MDMA and MDA appeared to be impulsivity in the behaviors, agitation or aggression, emotional instability, paranoia, confusion, and altered perceptions. Now, can you individually look and say paranoia? No, but if you look at actions, you can come back and say, what was the person doing at the time they made the judgment? And it would be a totality. So in this case, I'm not telling you a measured level of impairment. I'm saying that there were physical behaviors and actions that were consistent with the adverse side effects of MDMA and MDMA intoxication, which no one's disagreeing with that. So when you look at the evidence, we're all looking at the same evidence, then I saw these characteristics that are consistent with the adverse side effects of MDMA.
Go to we just skip the next slide. We want to do the
Sure.
next slide. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about in this particular case.
I think I've done this on the monograph, but I think it helps to put it in perspective, and that is that if you look at Marquise McLaughlin, the autopsy results produced a blood test on the right side that were a toxicology test done with proper procedures, appropriate test, and gave us a valid answer. That was 459.5 nanograms per mil. If you convert the units, 0.459. If you look on the left side with what we see in the clinical trial stages, that's where a 75 milligram dose, oral administered dose, produces a 0.31 milligram per liter. So comparing that, it's the amount found in his system post-mortem was many times higher than what we would use in a clinical setting, even in a controlled setting. And we even see adverse side effects, as illustrated in the bottom. We see adverse side effects start as low as 0.05 concentration. So this isn't a case of debating overdose. This is a case of saying, was it higher than you would expect for the achievement or production of adverse side effects? It clearly is. Then looking at the evidence and saying, was there decisions or behaviors or actions that would be consistent with the intoxication of MDMA?
All right. And so based on that, you were able to, like you said, read all the reports, witness statements, watch the video. What were the specific actions that you felt that correlated with the symptoms of the MDMA?
Yes. So I would, if you want to go back to the previous slide. Previous. I think this helps to, in total, this was the appearance or impression of questions that I had, clinical observations, from watching the same evidence. And that was one, we saw that Mr. McLaughlin went outside and left his child behind with strangers in the store. So that was, at that juncture, he didn't know the severity or totality of what was happening outside, but left his child behind. If the video shows, there was no adults around within seconds. The number two was displayed instant physical and behavioral aggression without provocation. Within 8 to 10 steps out the front door, there was no dialogue with Ms. Jacobs to discern who started, what was being said, what the nature and intensity was. There was no discussion with Mr. Drejka either. There was just a physical assault, a significant one that dropped him to the ground. After that, there was also no assessment of the situation for additional risk factors. Were there more than one person around the car? Were there other risk factors? Also, the assault and the individual without consideration for the family and the children. Like, was there someone already with the children, and attacking Mr. Drejka would be produce a different outcome for the family. And then after that was after having been shot, he left the children and his girlfriend in the car, and went back into the facility. So I do appreciate he had been shot and was doing some type of retreat, but if the intent was to protect Brittany and the children, it was an opposite effect of what you would expect.
And then ultimately, you came up with two opinions in this case, correct? And what were those two opinions?
The first opinion was that on 7/19/18, at the time of his death, that Marquise McLaughlin had substantial amounts of two impairing and intoxicating controlled substances in his system, Mdma, and one of its pharmacologically active metabolites, Mda, in his system, which is indicative of it recent ingestion, and within that time frame that correlates with intoxication and effects. On 7/19/18, at the time of his death, Marquise McLaughlin behavior and actions appeared consistent with known and reported adverse side effects of Mdma and Mda, specifically including confusion, impulsivity, agitation, aggression, emotional instability, or altered perceptions.
If I can have one moment. Doctor, just one last thing. Initially, when you were talking, when you said retreat, you were talking about, earlier you talked about after the shove, there was the step forward, and then when the gun was pulled out. Can you explain that again?
Sure. So after the physical altercation where he dropped Mr. Drejka to the ground, he took additional step towards, so he was still over and hovering over Mr. Drejka. It wasn't until the weapon was being brandished that it appeared that he took 2 steps or a step and a half backwards.
All right. I have no further questions at this time.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Very good. Good afternoon.
So just to follow up on the last question, so it was clear to you in watching the video that Mr. McLaughlin was retreating when the firearm came out, right?
Upon seeing the firearm,
Yeah, that's when he retreated, when the gun came out.
yes, about a step and a half.
Okay, and he couldn't go back any further because the car was there, right?
That is correct.
All right, and he turned to his right side, in fact, his left foot crossed over, and he was facing the firearm when he was shot, right?
He was still facing the firearm.
Okay, meaning I don't mean him. His eyes were looking at the firearm. His body was actually facing away.
It was turning, but it wasn't fully away. He still, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to have taken the shot in the chest.
Okay, well, what do you mean in the chest? Where was he shot?
About 2 inches below the left nipple.
Okay, and where, can you show us the path of travel?
No, I don't have the diagram. I have the autopsy report, but I don't remember seeing the diagram.
Okay, well, the way you just made it sound is that he couldn't have been shot in the chest. Well, what happened? He was shot in the chest, and then where'd the bullet go?
It was retrieved by the medical examiner.
Right, where was it?
Well, I think we all agree he was shot from the front in the chest,
Where in the front?
about 2 inches below the nipple,
Okay, and where'd that bullet go?
inside the chest cavity.
Where?
You'd have to ask the medical examiner.
No, I know where. I'm asking if you know where, because you said you examined all these reports. Where did the bullet go?
I don't, I'd have to pull the autopsy report to see if it was mentioned, the trajectory track.
Okay, well, you just a second ago, you said that he had to be facing him to get shot in the chest. You're trying to give this jury the impression that Mr. McLaughlin was facing dead on Mr. Drejka.
Because that's not what his testimony was. He said that he was shot in the chest. We approach.
That's a different question. What are you approaching?
No, I mean,
Okay. So, do you know, you don't know where the bullet went then? You don't know the path to travel, do you?
No, sir. I saw the video, and his body was not turned, and he was not shot in the back with an exit wound in the chest.
I'm not saying he's shot in the back.
No, but you did just try to say that.
Let me finish my question.
Well, I was trying to finish mine.
Okay. But you don't ask questions, you answer.
Would you be permitted to respond before counsel cuts him
well,
off?
I don't think we've heard a question yet, so go ahead and ask the question.
Do you know where the bullet ended up in Mr. McLaughlin's body?
I've already answered that question.
No,
It was
you
in his
haven't.
I have. It was in his chest cavity, and I do not know the trajectory. So any time asking me one more time won't get a different answer.
Okay, and I am going to ask just one more time. The chest area is a fairly large area. Where in the chest did the bullet end up?
Objection asked and answered.
No, I'll sustain that.
Now, interestingly, you said that MDMA well, I think you said MDMA is a Schedule 1,
Yes.
and then you chose one drug to kind of what was the one drug you said when you were talking about Schedule 1 drugs? What was it? You said MDMA. What was the other one you chose?
Methamphetamine.
Okay. How many different drugs are in the Schedule 1 statute?
Quite a few. I also stated that it was similar to mescaline, another hallucinogen.
Okay. When you say quite a few, how many other drugs are there, approximately?
Hundreds.
190? Does that sound about right?
I don't have an exact count. That doesn't surprise me.
Okay, well, I can show you a statute book. You want to take a look at the statute book?
No, sir, it wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, so if I said 190 plus, that you take my word for it?
Plus or minus.
Okay, well, plus or minus what?
No, not plus. I didn't answer a plus or minus. I said plus or minus. It could be over or under the 190.
Okay, you'd agree with me it's well over 175, wouldn't you?
Yes, but you're compared on a schedule on a controlled substance analog for your structural similarity, and it is a structural similar to methamphetamine.
Okay, so there are 175 plus other drugs that are Schedule 1 drugs, but you chose methamphetamine. That's my question, correct?
Because of the substantial structural similarity. If you read the full statute, that's how it works.
Okay, well, I have it right here. So, but you're not trying to make a comparison between MDMA and methamphetamine. You're not saying they have the same effects, right?
I made the statement very clearly in the beginning. They don't have the same effects, but they are closely related,
Okay, because I was just curious why you chose that, because cannabis is also a Schedule 1 drug, right?
which is not substantially chemically related at all.
Okay. And you made it clear that although MDMA and MDA can be two different drugs, in this case with Mr. McLaughlin, it's the metabolite.
I stated it would be my interpretation. I can't state with 100% certainty, but based on the ratio of the two, the size, the amounts measured, it would be more consistent with being the metabolite.
You didn't give your opinion on this case just this past Monday, right?
Pardon me?
You didn't give your opinion until this past Monday, right?
Well, until yesterday during a deposition.
Okay, all right. So yesterday was the first time you gave your opinion.
In a deposition, officially, correct.
Let's talk about your billing. What rate do you bill at? How much an hour?
$400 an hour, which is consistent with our clinical practice 15-minute increment billing.
And about how many hours prior to the deposition did you put in this case?
I don't have a ledger in front of me.
Okay. Well, do you remember yesterday you told me about 10 hours during the deposition?
Sure, 8 to 10. It wasn't a large volume of activity.
Okay. But do you remember yesterday saying it was 10?
I would 8 to 10, 10.
Okay. Well, do you want to refresh your memory on the deposition?
No, I have a copy. I don't see that as a substantially different answer. I have a copy here.
Okay. Well, because a minute ago I thought you said you didn't really keep a ledger, and then I reminded you that it was 10, and then you said 8 to 10. That's what I'm wondering.
I explained to you last night that I was not looking at a billing ledger either.
Okay. So as of yesterday, prior to the deposition, you billed about $4,000 worth, correct?
No, sir. I'd done about 8 to 10 hours of time.
Oh, so you don't bill for all your time?
I haven't billed at all for this case.
Okay. But you're going to bill for this case, right?
It does not appear so.
Okay. Now, well, let me ask you this. The reason you're saying that is you're not sure if the chief judge in the circuit was going to...
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, this is...
No. Oh.
The reason you're saying that is you weren't sure if the chief judge was going to authorize payments for you, correct?
No, sir. It appears there was a technical or a clerical error in some of the forms. It may get worked out afterwards. I don't know.
Okay. So if I told you that on August 6th, there was an order authorizing your payment, is that going to be news to you?
What was the amount stated?
up to, let's see,
What was the-
7,500.
What was the hourly rate?
Well, the total amount's 7,500.
Which is irrelevant. What was the hourly rate?
What do you mean it's irrelevant,
That's not the question you're asking me. What would I bill?
right? And now we're off on a whole different topic. So the
Really?
question is, well, what are you going to bill?
At this point, it appears that I'm not.
Oh, why?
I've already explained that. There was a clerical error in the paperwork before the case, and the case is already going.
Okay, so this is where I just need you to follow along with me, okay? All right. So you're saying that your belief is there's a clerical error preventing you from being paid in this case, right?
Objection, asked and answered, and now becoming excessively argumentative, Your Honor.
Overruled.
That's all I'll say.
So your understanding was that you weren't being paid because of this clerical error you're talking about.
No, sir. That there was an inability to bill for the time produced on work on the case.
Okay, but
It may get resolved after. I don't know.
Okay, I'm telling you that there's an order that it is resolved.
Objection, he's
And I-
testifying now.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Can you just take your time, read over that, let me know when you're finished, please.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, what do you see?
I see an order that has incorrect amounts on it signed by Judge Anthony Rondolino.
What, I understand you say incorrect amounts, but it has a cap on there. You could be paid $7,500, right? That's what it says.
No, sir.
Oh, it doesn't say that? So, I'm going to read 3. An initial compensation cap of $7,500 is hereby established at an hourly rate not to exceed $189 per hour, with leave to file additional motions for additional caps upon the showing of good cause. Travel time shall be paid at $80 per hour.
Which would
The
not,
expert shall receive standard expenses for mileage, meals, and lodging in accordance with Florida statutes.
which would not be accurate based on the billing time for the services provided. That may be something that is a clerical error, can be corrected later, but I wouldn't bill at that rate.
Okay. So the fact that you're authorized to get $7,500, you just don't want it.
If it's not able to be billed in that fashion, correct.
Okay, so let's talk about your educational background.
Yes, sir.
So you have a pharmacy degree, right?
Yes, a doctorate of pharmacy,
All right, so you're a pharmacist.
correct, and a clinical pharmacologist.
Okay, but I understand you're both. Now, when I go get my prescriptions filled at CVS, or I go to Walgreens, or where I choose to go, a pharmacist fills those prescriptions, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the degree that you have.
Well, it could be a different degreed pharmacist filling those prescriptions.
Okay. But in order to fill prescriptions, you have to be a pharmacist, you have to get the pharmacy degree?
By law, but it could be a different degree than the one that I hold.
Okay. But people in your position are pharmacists,
Not necessarily. You could be a physician as well.
okay? Are you a physician?
No,
You're a pharmacist.
correct, and a clinical pharmacologist. You said in my position.
Okay. Now, you make a significant amount of money testifying for the defense, isn't that correct?
I don't, it goes to the practice.
Okay. Now, you said you're, well, are you a professor at USF?
Associate professor.
Okay, so you're not a professor.
But it's in the same term, associate professor. There are different tiers,
Okay. Is the associate professor tier higher or lower?
lower. It also carries different connotations. I'm not in a tenure track position by choice.
All right, and you've been working there since the early 90s?
On and off. So there's times that I've been full faculty, and then times that I've been clinical faculty, and then times that I've been associate professor.
Fair to say that you make more money testifying for the defense than you make at USF?
I would think so. The USF commitment is not a 40-hour-a-week commitment.
Okay, so the answer is yes, you make more money testifying than you do working as an associate professor at USF.
Well, the money that is paid for this is paid for my time to a practice, and it doesn't change the amount that I take home. I take home a salary.
Okay. I want to make sure you're understanding my question, okay? Do you make more money testifying for the defense than you do as an associate professor at the University of South Florida? That's the only question I'm asking.
Objection, asked and answered.
He hasn't answered it. Do you understand my question?
Well, I do, but it's an improperly structured question, because you're saying that I
According
make...
to who?
Sir, can I finish?
Sure,
You-
tell me
you-
how my question's wrong.
Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So you're saying, how much do I make from testifying? I'm not making that money. It's going to the practice. So,
Can I stop you just for a moment?
again, yes.
Your Honor,
Okay.
may the witness be allowed to finish his
Okay.
answer without being
Finish.
interrupted by Mr. Rosenwasser repeatedly?
Finish.
All right, you made it.
So there are different elements that make up the practice income, and I have a salary that is drawn from the practice. But if I did 1 case or 30 cases in 2020, it's not changing the salary base that I'm taking home. So I'm not making any difference. The practice would. And yes, the University of South Florida is a fixed amount on an annual basis, but that amount changes over time.
Still not sure if you answered my question, but I'm going to move on.
Objection to the commentary by counsel.
No editorializing, Mr. Rosenwald.
Now, when you say the money goes to practice, what practice are you talking about?
Clinical pharmacology services.
Okay, so who owns that business?
I do.
Okay, so if the money goes to the practice and you own that practice, who's getting the money?
As I stated, to the practice, it doesn't change my salary base of what I would take home.
Okay, so the money's going to the practice you own, but it's not benefiting you?
Well, it's helping to run the practice, just like any service. Any medical practice, any hospital, any facility, any university has to have income that drives the practice.
Sure, I understand that, but aren't you benefiting from the practice?
Not benefiting incrementally different for a case-by-case basis, no, sir.
Okay. What about over like a long period of time? Did you make money from your business? Or you don't make any money at your business?
Asked and answered.
Do you make any money at your business?
Yes, and I take a salary, and then I leave proceeds in. How I manage the practice is like any other business manages that. You might change the number of staffing you have. You might add additional equipment. You might buy updated software. So, yes.
Let's see. Yesterday, when we took your deposition, you said that you were the president of something. What was that? You recall?
I'll let you find it.
The president of the American Institute of... Do you remember what you said?
I do. Pharmaceutical sciences.
Okay, you're the president of the American Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, sir.
Is that a national organization?
No.
All right. Is that, they have branches just maybe in the southeast?
It's one practice. It's a nonprofit research institute on our practice. So both Clinical Pharmacology Services and AIPS is a nonprofit organization that helps to fund industry-based research. So many of the projects we've done have helped patients gain access to medication, high-risk medications or difficult-to-reach medications. We've looked at how to improve health outcomes with opiate and pain management prescribing. So it's not a, I'm seeing a patient, it's a more of a research entity.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that.
Yes, sir.
So, when you hold yourself out for your expert testimony, one of the things that you bring up frequently is that you're the president of this American Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, right?
That is correct, which is
All
a
right.
nonprofit research institute.
Okay. Now, my questions are, is this is a company that you yourself started, right?
That is correct.
In fact, you filed articles of incorporation in the state of Florida, and who was it that named the company? Who made up the name American Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences? Who made that up?
I did,
Okay.
when I did the paperwork application, which
Okay.
was standard.
Okay. I mean, really, anyone can make up a name for a company and then appoint themselves president, especially if they're starting the company, right?
That's how it works. But in the full disclosure of the different activities that I do and provide, that's a different business entity that provides healthcare research activities.
Okay. So, so you have a for-profit practice, right?
That's correct.
And then you have
Clinical
another
Pharmacology
practice.
Services.
Okay, and then you have another practice that's nonprofit.
That is correct. American Institute of Pharmaceutical
Okay,
Sciences.
and they're both based in the same location, right?
They are, and that's acceptable.
Okay. I just wanted everyone to know what was involved, what your involvement was.
Objection again to commentary by counsel, Your Honor. What he wants, thank you.
Now, at your for-profit business, you help patients determine what medications will work for them, right?
Correct. Perform medication therapy management consultations, which is looking at their entire medication profile, prescription and over-the-counter, and identify if, based on their medical conditions, if there's a missing need or if there's duplicate therapies or if there's complications and drug interactions, and if there's opportunities to reduce what patients are on for patient safety.
Okay. So the answer is yes. You look at medications to make sure there's no adverse effects and work with them on their medication.
Correct. And make clinical recommendations.
And a part of your practice is also dedicated to helping people navigate the bureaucratic system of how to get insurance for their medications, right?
Yes.
You mentioned his irrelevancy, Your Honor. Are we going to get any questions about his opinion, or is this all going to be about his practice?
I guess we'll find out.
So you help people navigate through the minefield of insurance.
Yes, if you look at the diversity of what patients come for consultation for over the last several years with medication access and affordability and drug shortages, many patients have come to ask for assistance to either switch to medications that may have discount pricing or patient assistance programs, or have a prior authorization in place that their primary care or specialty practice hasn't been able to navigate and get health plan approval for. So a wide variety. Improving a patient's compliance and adherence to their medication is, I think, equally critical to a clinical recommendation.
You indicated during direct examination that there's a pendulum that swings between when you testify for the state and when you testify for the defense, right?
Correct. Or federal, or Mdma, or criminal.
Okay. And a Rule 26 form, that's a form that you have to file if you're going to testify in federal court, right?
Correct. It's a particular part of the federal statute on expert witnesses that say you disclose in a federal case a specific set of information on your prior case testimony.
Do you have the form with you? Do you have a copy of your own Federal 26?
I, per your request, sent a copy this morning to counsel.
Okay, I have it. I'm wondering if you have a copy of your own.
No, sir.
Okay. If necessary, does the defense counsel have a copy? If it's okay, when we go through it, if you need to, you can look at the copy that you provided to me, okay?
I'm fine.
All right, so let's talk about this pendulum. In 2015, and I think you're going to have to look at this. May I approach the witness? You may. This is your, I'm going to ask you some questions off that.
I don't even
Okay.
think this is readable.
That's okay, she's going to bring up her iPad.
Okay.
In all fairness, I only have 7% left, so hopefully this is a quick questioning.
Okay. Oh, better. Okay.
Okay, so in 2015, how many times did you testify in a criminal case for the state?
Oh, I don't know. I would have to try to figure out what each of these were.
Okay, well, it'll be easy, because if it's a criminal case, it'll say state of Florida versus someone. If it's a civil case, it'll have obvious plaintiff and defendant. So it'll be easy to find out which one's crime.
I don't think this is a full display. I think there were more cases in 15 that are displayed on this.
Okay, well, and you just, I'm going to ask you some questions, and you can verify it on the Rule 26 form that you provided to us. Apparently in 2015, you never testified for the state in a criminal case.
I didn't say that I did.
And you testified, and again, you can look at your Rule 26 form, for the defense 5 times. So in 2015, 100% of the time you testified for the defense. Would that be a fair statement then, based on your own Rule 26 form?
In what year?
2015?
Like I stated, this can't be a full list of 15.
Okay, well, that's what was provided to us. That's what I'm going off of.
I didn't give it to you. It came through counsel.
Who provided it to counsel?
I did, but I'm stating that I don't think this is an accurate count of 15.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about 2016. And I'm just going to ask you the question. You can look on there. You have it in front of you. Let me know, whether or not I'm wrong. In 2016, criminal cases, again, you can look on there for criminal cases. They'll say state of Florida versus somebody. Would it be accurate to state that you testified 0 times for the state and 12 times for the defense? Which would mean in 2015 and in 2016, you testified 100% of the time for the defense. Is that a fair statement?
No, sir. I see plaintiff cases in here as well.
Okay, I'm not plaintiff for civil cases. I'm talking about criminal cases, which would be state of Florida versus somebody.
Okay, but you said defense.
Well, right, but I'm only talking about criminal cases.
Okay. There's a lot to count. I don't have a total.
Okay. Would it aid you if I showed you mine?
No, I looked at yours, it wasn't readable.
Okay, well, do you have any readers? Because it,
I tried, that didn't help.
okay.
So with regards to state, yes, it looks like that. I'm scrolling through 16.
Okay, so 2016, you never testified for the state, it was always for the defense.
It does appear that way.
Okay. Let's talk about 2017. Again, criminal cases we're talking about. Would it surprise you to learn that you never testified for the state and 12 times it was for the defense?
In 17?
Correct?
No.
No what?
No to your answer, your question.
Okay, so in 2017, point to a criminal case where you testified for the state.
7/25/2017 trial titled State of Florida versus Assay, Mark James, 4th Judicial Circuit.
Okay, so where was that?
7/25/2017, based on the left column.
Oh, I'm sorry, you put it was plaintiff on there, that's how I was thrown off, because it said plaintiff as opposed to state, so I apologize.
Correct, the state was the plaintiff.
Okay. Well, in a criminal case, it's the state, but,
Objection,
It
testifying.
was a criminal case.
okay. Any others, other than that one time?
I don't know, I'm still scrolling. but
Okay,
Go ahead.
well, just take your time.
I
Any other times other than that one time?
I don't see that here.
Okay, so in 2015, never, 2016, never, 2017, one time.
Based on what's on this list. Now, there may have been other work that didn't materialize to a trial or a deposition.
Okay,
The-
well, I'm
the
only going
federal-
off the list
Sorry,
that
I'm
you
not
provided.
finished. The Federal Rule 26 says to list not all cases that you've worked on, but cases you've provided testimony on.
Okay, well, then that's what I'm asking you about, is your testimony. When you testified for the defense, that was the basis of my question.
Correct.
Okay.
And I agreed.
Okay, and in fact, yesterday, remember during your deposition, you said, and I could get the quote if you need to look at it, you were very proud of this form. You remember that?
I am. I've never seen a Federal Rule 26 include as much information as we've put on, thanks
Right.
to a recent request from a judge.
Okay. And because of your very accurate information, we know that in 3 years, you've testified for the state only one time, correct?
Based on what's on here, that's correct.
Okay. Let's
Testified.
All right, let's take a look at 2018. And take your time looking through it. Would you be surprised to learn that in 2018, you testified for the state 0 times and 25 times for the defense?
No, just going back and scrolling.
It's okay,
Looks
take
like
your
an,
time.
well, I hadn't finished. I thought I found another 17. So now I'm looking at 18. No, I don't see another state on 18.
Okay, so never. All right, let's talk about 2019.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
talk about this
Sorry,
year.
Never what?
Hmm?
I'm sorry, never what?
Testified for the state, and it was always for the defense.
No,
25 times in 2018.
for 18.
Right.
This
okay.
only goes back 4 years then.
I know, and that's where we started 4 years ago.
I understand, but I'm
Okay.
just saying, I thought you said never testified. I was saying that's
No,
grossly
no, I
incorrect.
wasn't saying that. 2019, okay, so this year, how many times have you testified for the state?
1, I think 2. Two
Okay,
for
now you
ni-
s-
2 for 19.
Okay, what's number one? What date is that?
5/3/2019.
And is that state of Florida versus Long?
I have to scroll back to it. Yes.
Okay, can you go to the column where you put representing? What does it say?
Defense.
Oh, so you're incorrect? You actually were
What?
representing the defense?
One of those, I think, is long.
Okay, what was the other day that you said? You said there were 2 times, so the first one, May 3rd, 2019, you actually testified for the defense. What was the other time you said?
Could you say that one more time?
Originally, you said that you did testify for the state, and it was May 3rd, 2019, but in looking at it, it does say that you testified for the defense, correct?
Correct. And I
All right,
said
so
I
that-
still think that it was for the state.
Okay, but the document that you provided says it's the defense.
Right. It also says it was for the state.
Where?
Third column at 5, 3/2019 trial, State of Florida versus Robert Long.
Okay, well, that's just the style of the case. That's just says State of Florida versus Robert Long. Like, this is State of Florida versus Michael Drejka. That doesn't tell me you testified for the state.
So there are different style cases that may have involved a lethal injection case where the state was the defense.
Okay, all right. Well, okay. What's the second case?
I'm looking for that now. No, the other was for defense.
Okay.
It was on 128 is what I thought.
So arguably, because you put on here you represented the defense, in 2019, you've only testified for the defense. I understand you're saying that you testified for the state, but you did put defense on there.
It was for the defense, the state.
Oh.
In a lethal injection case, the inmate is suing the state of Florida.
Okay, that's a civil case. That's not a criminal case.
It's the state of Florida. It's the state attorney's office.
Do you know the difference between a civil case and a criminal case?
I do.
All right.
You need to get your iPad. You're almost out. You're okay.
All right, so you were testifying about MDMA, and I can't recall the exact language you used, but you talked about substantial danger or something like that at some point in time. Is that correct?
Substantial amounts.
Okay.
I did say it is a dangerous drug as well.
Okay. Would you agree with me that some of the most frequent effects of MDMA use is closeness to others?
No.
No? Okay. Would you agree with me that some of the most frequent effects are facilitation to interpersonal relationship?
It is a psychedelic, and yes, people can have empathetic reactions, but that doesn't mean they're taking it and always around another person.
Okay. My question to you is, though, would you agree with me that one of its most frequent effects is facilitation to interpersonal relationships?
I think that would be restated one of its most desired effects when someone takes it. There's no certainty or guarantee that that is the outcome. You can have any end of the spectrum when you take that drug.
Would you agree with me that one of the most frequent effects is euphoria?
Yes, followed by depression and other neurobiologic side effects.
And euphoria, the definition of euphoria is an intense feeling of happiness, right?
It could. That's not the only definition.
Okay. But it's the main one, right? Like when you do the dictionary and the first one pops up, that's the main one, right?
Sure, but the spectrum of adverse side effects goes far beyond the word euphoria.
Okay. I'm just asking about the most frequent effects.
No, sir.
All right.
I would not state that that's the most frequent effect.
Okay. Would you agree with me that one of the most frequent effects is well-being?
No, sir.
No? All right. Would you agree with me that one of the most frequent effects is a general state of happiness?
No, sir. Not if you're having an adverse reaction.
Would you agree with me that one of the most frequent effects is feeling close to others?
No, sir. Again, I stated that if you're not around other people, that would be illogical.
That wasn't my question.
Well, you asked me an answer.
Would you agree with me that one of the most frequent effects is increased empathy and enhanced mood?
It is an empathetic agent, and we already discussed that, yes.
So you would agree then that one of the most frequent effects is increased empathy and increased mood?
So I didn't agree to the frequency. I'm stating that as a hallucinogenic and psychedelic agent, that is an effect that can occur, but you can have other adverse effects too.
All right. As part of your opinion, and we're going to get to your opinion now, as part of your opinion, you relied on an article that was provided to you, and yesterday during your deposition you said you relied on it. It's the Human Pharmacology of MDMA, and I think, and I might be mispronouncing the name, the author was Raphael De La Torre, correct?
That was one of several.
Okay. But that was one of them, right? That's what you talked about?
It was one of them.
All right. Are you going to, you have it with you?
I do. I'm just
Okay.
looking for it now.
And you relied on that particular article or that particular literature to come to your conclusions or your opinions here today, right?
It was, as I stated yesterday, one of many compilation.
Okay, so I'll rephrase it. Was this one of many that you relied upon?
Yes.
Okay. You have it in front of you?
No, sir. I'm looking for it now.
Okay,
There's
let me know when you
numerous.
have it in front of you.
All right, I have it.
Okay. I need to make, may I approach the witness? Okay. It's going to be in a little different format. Okay, let's take a look at abstract together.
Yes, sir.
Can you go to the sentence that starts with the most frequent?
I see it, it's about 25% of the way down.
Okay. Does it say in the article that you relied upon to help form your opinion the most frequent effects after MDMA ecstasy administration are euphoria, well-being, happiness, feeling close to others, increased empathy, and enhanced mood?
Yes, and the very next sentence goes into the acute toxic effects.
Okay, but my question to you was, are the most frequent effects, and I listed all of these, and you disagreed with all of that in the article that you provided me?
Correct, I think that's that author's way to characterize that sentence, and I'm not saying those don't happen. I'm saying that there's no predictability that that's going to be the outcome you achieve. And there's acute toxicities even at standard acute doses.
Right, but the most frequent effects, what mostly happens are these things.
Correct, and I don't think we saw any of those displayed at the event in this case.
Oh, we're going to get to the event in just a second.
Yes, sir.
You know that ecstasy or ex-MDMA is predominantly used at rave clubs, right?
No, sir.
You don't? Okay. But all your studies and all your background training experience, you didn't know that ecstasy was commonly used at rave clubs?
No, I think the way you phrased the sentence was incorrect. It's not exclusively used or predominantly used. It's a frequently abused drugs in all settings.
Okay. My question to you was, are you aware that this drug is used frequently at rave clubs?
Yes, as well as many other settings.
All right. And the reason for that is because it has an enhanced mood. It's more of a social drug, right?
It's a psychedelic agent, correct, a
Okay.
hallucinogen.
Because people wouldn't use it and go to the clubs if they were then going to fight each other, right? That wouldn't
No.
make any sense.
No, that happens routinely,
Oh, it does happen routinely?
yes.
Oh, okay. All right, so you said that you looked at a wide variety of information to come to your opinions in this case, right?
Yes,
Okay, you looked at police reports,
correct,
depositions,
correct,
the videos,
correct,
autopsy,
correct,
toxicology,
correct.
read everything you possibly could, right?
Well, what was provided to review, yes.
Okay. And is your opinion that Marquise McLaughlin had an acute severe reaction to MDMA?
No, I would say adverse side effects that are consistent with, as I stated in both my opinion and demonstration slides, adverse side effects consistent with the effects of MDMA and MDA.
Reported adverse side effects of MDMA.
Adverse side effects that are consistent with MDMA use and MDA use.
Okay. Now, another article that you relied upon was called Empathy and Aggression.
Correct,
Do you have that with you?
I do.
All right. And this was a study with MDMA users, right?
No, it was a survey tool,
It was a survey tool?
yes.
Okay. And what this survey tool was is when MDMA was taken, they then measured responses 4 days out and 7 days out, correct?
Not quite.
Not
So
quite.
to understand the study and the study design, they identified a period that they would repeat the questions. So they didn't measure effects. They asked patients or individuals at clubs where they were using these drugs, if anyone had used, would they answer a survey on that day, 4 days later, and 7 days later. So there was no control as to what they took, no identification of exactly what was in their system. In that particular case, on day 0 was the day that they did the first survey and took something, but no time relevance.
Well, when you say they took something, they took MDMA.
Correct,
Okay.
based on self-reporting.
Okay.
And then
But
on day
that's
4,
what makes, in order for this to be published, it's got to go through some criteria, right?
no, I don't think that's the way we would say it.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. You relied upon this in part for your opinion that you gave here today, right?
No, I made opinions about this as it relates to this case.
That's right. You read this, and then you derived some opinions from this that you testified to today.
No, the opinions about it, not opinions from it. There's a big difference.
Oh, okay. Did this article mean anything to you with respect to your testimony?
It did. It would be inappropriate to use this article to imply or say to someone that you wouldn't see aggression for 4 days. In this particular study, they didn't reevaluate the individual until day 4 and then day 7. The study design fails to identify what happened on day 1, 2, and 3, and as well as day 5, 6.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you a single question about day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, or day 7.
Nor
okay?
did the researchers.
Okay, okay. But my question has nothing to do with any of those other days, so let's not worry about what they didn't do in the study. My question is going to only deal with day 0, okay? All right. Now, in the introduction to the literature that you provided, that you relied upon, it says MDMA is a popular recreational drug taken for its acute effects that include increased euphoria, energy, and empathy, correct?
Yes, the imperative piece that you just stated is taken for. So people will take a recreational drug with the goal and expectation of having a particular effect. Clearly, it's a central nervous system stimulant. It's a hallucinogen. It causes neurobehavioral effects. You don't know what effect you're going to get when you take it.
Okay, in the top right-hand corner, can you go to page 429?
Yes,
Okay, so let's talk about day 0. What's day 0 mean in this table?
the first day.
Okay, and that's the day that the drug's taken, right? So in this particular survey, as you stated, day 0 is the day MDMA is taken, correct?
Correct.
All right, so to analogize it to this particular case, it would be July 19th, 2018. That would be the day the drug was taken, correct?
Correct.
All right, and when you look at irritability, okay, now in this chart that we're looking at that you relied upon, you see it says MDMA, and then on the other side it says control, correct?
I think you're misrepresenting what I relied upon. I think you're saying that I took something from this and said it's the basis for my opinion. I took information from this and says it would be opposed to using it as the basis for your opinion. I did use this article in the development, not to support my points, but to explain.
Wait, so you gave us this article and it had no support of your point?
Sir, my points are that it is disingenuous and delusional, delusional, to only tell part of. You need to be transparent and explain what the full adverse side effects of these medications are. So it is not just a happy drug, and that is not, this study doesn't support that.
Okay, so let's talk about day 0, okay?
Yes, sir.
When you look at irritability, look at the people that used MDA and then look at the control.
Correct, with no control for the amount of MDA that they took, which is consistent with my testimony.
Okay.
The more you take, the more adverse side effects you can have. This
Okay.
study didn't control for that.
Okay. The control group is the group that did not take MDMA. That's the purpose of the control group, right?
Well, that's the one safe group, if they were being honest, yes.
Okay. But you seem to be like discounting the paper that you provided to us to help with your opinion.
So again, you're misrepresenting my statement. I can provide an article that appears to be in play for a protocol, and if upon review of the study design and the results, it's not beneficial, I'm explaining the shortcomings of the article, not saying I'm basing my opinion on it.
Well, we'll skip through the article fairly quickly, okay? Looking at MDMA, isn't it true that when you look at the chart, the people that took MDMA were less irritable than the people who did not on day 0?
Yes, that would not be surprising.
Okay, and also according to this chart, the individuals that took MDMA on day 0, they were less depressed than the control group.
Correct. How long after the dose administered was this survey instrument executed? You can't tell from this study. That's one of my points. It's inappropriate results that don't support the statements that you would have delayed irritability or impulsivity or aggression.
Okay, and on day 0, with respect to anxiety, anxiety was much less in the MDMA group than the control group, correct?
Based on this, but I've already stated I don't have confidence in the study design.
Okay, so you gave us paperwork that you don't have confidence in to derive your opinion from.
To make my point about my opinion that this would not support that. Yes, I highlighted poor science.
Let's just talk about a couple other things about this study.
Same study?
Same one.
Okay.
The participants in this group used MDMA twice a month, correct?
Per the survey response.
Okay. And we don't know anything about Mr. McLaughlin, right?
Correct. Nor do we know that that was an accurate response if the individuals don't know what they put in their system.
In that same survey that we were talking about, do you see in there where the authors state that on day 0, the day that the MDMA is taken, that the users show a comparatively high level of contentment, which is a state of happiness and satisfaction? the day they used it.
Correct. That would not be surprising.
So in relation to that particular survey, what that's stating is that the people that took MDMA on day 0 were less irritable, more content, less anxious, less depressed. The other article that we talked about shows that MDMA users have a general sense of happiness, euphoria, empathy. Okay?
And would be totally missing other parts of the article that speaks to the adverse side effects that go into impulsivity, aggression, agitation, and other neurobehavioral changes. So it's important to be transparent with the jury as to what the full spectrum of these side effects are. And again, I did not see happy, warm, content feelings. If I was looking for the evidence in
You
it,
didn't see happy and content feelings.
wow.
All right, you may answer.
So if in reviewing the evidence, I was asked, which do I see? Impulsivity, aggression, confusion, or do I see happiness, contentment? They would not steer to that side. The
Okay.
symptoms that would be consistent would be the symptoms that I described.
Okay, so, and we're going to go into some of your opinions in a second. So are you saying that Mr. McLaughlin, upon hearing that his girlfriend outside is in an altercation, and as he walks outside, he sees the defendant right by her driver's side window, pointing and waving his finger at her,
Correct.
he should have been happy when he walked outside?
No, sir. Should have gone to ascertain what's happening. Who started? What was said? What was the nature of the dialogue?
Okay, but you're saying that you didn't see any happiness, you didn't see any warmth, you didn't see any content. So should he have been warm when he walked out there after hearing what he heard?
Are you asking me to ascertain or to decide which of those characteristics appeared to be present when he went from the door of the Circle A to the altercation?
No, what you're saying is that you didn't see happiness, you didn't see warmth, and you didn't see contentment. Were you expecting to see happiness, warmth, and contentment when Mr. McLaughlin went outside the store after hearing that the defendant over here was confronting his girlfriend in the parking lot? Were you expecting happiness, warmth, and contentment?
I don't even understand the nature of that question.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll break down a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. So you said that you didn't see any happiness with Mr. McLaughlin, right?
It did not appear to be happiness
Okay.
with the sequence of steps that took place.
Okay. Is it reasonable when someone learns that their girlfriend, who has kids in the car, is being confronted by a stranger, so much so that another stranger has to come into a store to tell the cashier, there's something going on?
Yes, that appears to have transpired, yes.
Right. And is your testimony that Mr. McLaughlin should have exhibited happy behaviors upon hearing that?
Again, I don't understand the question. I'm not expecting Mr. McLaughlin to have any behaviors. What I'm doing is observing, just like everyone else, the same evidence of what transpired.
All right, so you watch the video and you see Mr. McLaughlin get out of the car and walk to the store, right?
Yes.
Okay, nothing unusual about that, right?
No, nor did I include that phase in any of my findings.
Right, so there's nothing unusual about him walking with his 5-year-old son up to the store to buy some items.
Other than having that much drug in his system, that would be unusual.
Okay, well, as he's walking up to the store with what you call that much drug in his system, did you see anything unusual about it?
No, I didn't include it in my findings. My findings start at the exit of the door of the Circle A.
Okay, well, wouldn't you agree with me that when you look at someone that's using drugs, you want to look at the whole picture?
I didn't find anything at that point. We're not talking about this like a DUI where he's going to have stumbling or he's going to have the inability to count. This is looking at the actions, and the actions of my observations don't start until the time he's leaving the door of the Circle A.
You don't think you should look at all the actions? Why are we only picking on certain actions?
I looked at all the actions. What I was looking for
Well, you
was...
just said you didn't look at those actions when he got out of the car.
Allow the witness to finish answering the question.
You just said that you didn't look at all the actions when he got out of the car.
No, sir. I didn't say that at all. I said I watched all of the video and all of the evidence. What I was looking for were abnormal behaviors and was anything consistent with the adverse side effects of MDMA and its metabolite, MDA.
So when he got out of the car and walked up to the store, you didn't see any adverse side effects?
For the third time, no.
Okay. And when he went into the store, you didn't see any adverse side effects?
Correct. I've stated repeatedly, it's my first observation of what appears to be an abnormal behavior or impulsivity was when he stepped out of the Circle A store.
And when he's in line, he's just getting ready to pay for his items just like anybody else would, right? Correct?
I don't know what that means, like anybody else would.
Oh, well, if you go to the store and you go buy stuff, how do you do it?
I don't reach over the counter.
Who reached over the counter?
Mr. McLaughlin.
What are you talking about?
I saw the same video. He reached up over the counter to get something to give to the cashier.
Well, he went to get like a tobacco product.
He may have. I don't know what you're asking.
Was there something unusual about reaching up to get a tobacco product to buy?
No, sir. The nature of your question was you inserted like any other person.
Well, you didn't understand what I meant by the way any person would go to a store and purchase products? You didn't understand what I meant by that?
I did. And I also had said multiple times prior to that, I had no observations of anything abnormal until he left the door of the Circle A. I don't know how to make it clear.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about your three main opinions. So your first main opinion was that the first time you saw Marquise McLaughlin have an adverse effect because of the MDMA was when he decided to leave his son in the store with strangers.
So that wasn't my opinion. That was an observation.
Okay. Your observation was
Yes,
that he left his son in the store with strangers,
that is correct.
but that was one of the observations that led you to conclude what?
That is correct. That he had behaviors and actions that were consistent with adverse side effects. So impulsivity, sir, I was not in the middle of a
Your Honor,
word.
this is going on now for some time. Are we going to get to a question that doesn't repeat itself consistently,
This
Judge?
hasn't been asked and answered.
I haven't even been allowed to answer.
I'm going to do the smart thing and not comment. You may continue, Mr. Rosenwasser.
Okay, so by Marquise McLaughlin leaving his son in the store, you're saying that was an adverse side effect of the MDMA that's consistent with
No, you're backwards.
impulsivity.
Yes.
Okay.
And impaired judgment.
Okay, so let's talk about the impaired judgment, okay? Let's talk about this. So you reviewed everything, and what you know is that, and you had times down because we saw them on your PowerPoint, right?
I did.
So how much time was it that the defendant was confronting Brittany Jacobs in her car? How much time did that go on for?
I don't have that. That's not what the nature of my review was.
Okay.
Nor
if
is
I-
it relevant to my opinion.
If I told, well, all right, well, we're gonna get there in a second. If I told you it was 1 minute and 43 seconds that the defendant was out in the parking lot going back and forth with Brittany Jacobs, would you take my word for it?
No, not at this juncture. But I will say that it was a period of time.
Okay. Would you like to watch the video?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, if you're not gonna take my word for it, let's watch the video and look at it together.
I don't think we need to waste the jury's time.
Okay. So, when you watched that video, did you see that people were getting out of their cars and looking over at what was happening between the defendant and Brittany Jacobs?
I did. Ms. Hicks and Anthony, I'm going to mispronounce the last name.
Robert Costelli?
Robert Costelli.
So,
So I'm trying to finish. I did see that in the observation that those individuals were actually able to look back because they were hearing something audible. I did.
okay, so you know that there's a heated argument going on outside, right?
Sir, it certainly appears that way.
Okay, and at this point in time, you know, based on reading everything, we have Brittany Jacobs in the car, right?
Correct? With 2 children.
With 2 children, okay? So there's about, you don't take my word for it, but 1 minute and 38 to 1 minute and 43 seconds that confrontation's going on outside. Brittany Jacobs, her 2 kids are in the car. Marquise is inside the store, right?
That is correct. Not aware of what's happening outside.
Okay, and he becomes aware of what's happening outside when Mr. Costelli comes in and tells the cashier, right?
Absolutely. I think we've all attested to that.
Okay, and then Marquise McLaughlin starts to go outside, correct?
Correct.
All right, now presumably, you don't know, I don't know, we're not in his head, but presumably, and it'd be reasonable to assume this, he's going outside to see what's going on because he hears there's an altercation and his girlfriend might be involved, right?
Absolutely. And,
Okay.
and the logic would be to go ascertain what is the nature and what's the risk.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So, based on your testimony, you're saying The adverse side effect of MDMA was that he actually protected his son by leaving him in the safety of the store with other people and going out on his own to see what's going on with this altercation in the parking lot.
Objection, Your Honor. There's no evidence that Mr. McLaughlin, not McLaughlin, knew what was going on outside. He was just advised that there was an issue outside in the parking lot.
An altercation.
No, that was not the testimony.
All right, you may continue with your question.
So is the adverse side effect that you're saying that he had from the MDMA, that he chose to leave his son in the safety of the store, and your testimony to this jury is that he should have taken his 5-year-old son with him all the way down the parking lot to where the confrontation took place, that would have been the best parenting decision he could make?
Or ask someone to retain him because he actually did step out the door into the area where it took place.
So it was a terrible decision to leave his son in the store with the door closed in the safety of the store.
So I've described this previously multiple times: impulsivity, aggression, emotional instability, confusion, altered perceptions. I've described that it's not a line item of one, it's the totality of the review, that the actions and behaviors in those few seconds were consistent with impulsivity, agitation, aggression, emotional instability, confusion, and altered perceptions.
All right, we're talking about the questions a lot, but how about if when he asks you a question, you actually answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Let's try that.
Try it again.
Can we approach, Your Honor?
You may continue with your question, Mr. Rosenwasser.
So your opinion, he should have taken his 5-year-old down to the altercation?
No, sir, I didn't say that.
Well, but he left him in the store, and that was an adverse effect of MDMA?
You're mischaracterizing my testimony.
Walking around a car, pointing a finger at the car for a minute and 43 seconds, would that be a sign of aggression?
Yes, but it's irrelevant to my testimony. That's not related to Mr. McLaughlin's condition.
Another reason that you indicated that your belief was that Marquise was having an adverse reaction to MDMA was because he placed Brittany in harm's way since she was in close proximity when Mr. McLaughlin pushed the defendant. Is that a fair statement?
Please restate.
One of the reasons that you testified Marquise was having an adverse reaction was because he placed Brittany in harm's way since she was in close proximity when he pushed the defendant.
And left after the gunshot.
That's a whole separate opinion. We're gonna get to that one in a second.
No, sir, I gave a totality of opinions. I didn't give a line item attached to one behavior.
Okay. Well, we could take your totality and break them down, which is what I'm doing.
And I did during my testimony.
Okay. So my question to you, okay? We're not talking yet about him being shot and going into the store where he dies. We're not there just yet. Okay? I'm focusing on this particular segment in my question. Okay?
Correct.
Okay. So my question again to you is, you testified that Marquise was having an adverse reaction to MDMA because he placed Brittany in harm's way since she was in close proximity to the defendant when he pushed the defendant.
Not isolated to one point on a standalone, but the
Your Honor,
totality.
I would ask that the witness please respond to my question.
Objection, Judge.
I
He's
was.
responding to the question. The fact that he's not responding to the way Mr. Rosenwasser wants him to respond doesn't mean he's not responding to the question. He's responding to the question, and he basically said that he can't break it down that way. That's the answer.
All right, so what's your question again? And we'll let him answer because you did cut him off before he really got going there, so.
Okay. Let's talk about this as one big umbrella, and then I'm going to show you, I'm going to explain to you how I'm breaking it down, okay? Okay. So we know that Marquise pushed the defendant to the ground, right?
It's obvious on the video, yes.
Okay. So that's one part, right? We know he gets shot, right?
That is correct.
Okay. We don't have to talk about that together, right? We can talk about separately. We can talk about the push, correct?
Correct. We can talk about every one of the data points.
Okay, well, then that's what I'm trying to do. I want to talk to you only about the push, and after that, we're going to talk about him being shot. Is that okay if we do it that way?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you again, only focusing on the push. Have you testified that Marquise was having an adverse reaction to Mdma because he placed Brittany in harm's way since she was in close proximity to the defendant at the time that Marquise pushed the defendant?
No, sir.
Okay. That wasn't one of the bases of your opinion for irritability or aggression or any of the other factors you talked about?
So I've already given the sequence in the totality, but the in close proximity was to leaving her after he had been shot with an individual who had a weapon.
Do you have your deposition in front of you?
I do. I'm looking for the word proximity in the keyword search.
If you could go to page 33.
It might be different because I have the word proximity used at 42.3, 42.14, 42.23, 43.20, and 2 additional places, no 32. I'm on page 32.
Okay, let's go to page 41, lines 11 to the bottom.
Yes, that's what I just stated.
Okay. So the question was, so leaving his child displayed aggression when he came out. What other actions did you see that led you to conclude your opinion about aggression and impulsivity? Do you see that?
What line?
11 through 14?
That's the question, yes.
Right, okay. And then on line 21 and 22 is your answer. The other is that he assaulted an individual without consideration for his family's safety.
That's correct. And in my description, I described that that's without knowing who else might be around the vehicle before there was a physical assault. That's
Okay.
different than the proximity.
And, okay, wait, so did you just say that being around the vehicle is different than proximity?
I'm saying I remember distinctly what I said last night, and that was that there was a concern that at the time of the physical altercation, there had not been any assessment of the circumstances of what was taking place in the dialogue between Jacobs and Drejka,
Okay, so.
and who was around.
Okay. Well, we know who's around because when you look at the video, you can see Brittany Jacobs is there, right?
We do based on the video. Mr. McLaughlin didn't at that juncture.
When he came out of the store and he's walking down the sidewalk, he sees the defendant waving his finger at Brittany Jacobs as she's sitting in the car, right?
He does, and it does not appear that his head goes to the left or right to ascertain who might else be in said altercation.
Okay, well, if his girlfriend and 2 kids are in the car, wouldn't it make sense that he's looking straight at that car? Because that's his primary concern, to make sure they're safe.
And that's exactly my point. And wouldn't it be imperative to identify and size up what is the situation you're about to enter into before a physical altercation?
Okay. And when he's walking down the sidewalk, then Brittany Jacobs comes out of the car, right? And now Brittany Jacobs and the defendant are basically face to face, right?
Correct, no physical contact.
Okay, but he's already been told that there's an altercation outside, and we know from the video that it's been going on for about 1 minute and 43 seconds.
Not to Mr. McLaughlin didn't know that.
Okay, and as he's going out there, now, you know, Brittany Jacobs comes out, they're face to face, and he creates distance by shoving the defendant to the ground. Are you saying that protecting his girlfriend was an adverse effect of MDMA?
No, I'm saying that at the juncture, he didn't know what he was getting in to separate before identifying or ascertaining what the circumstances were.
Oh, so he should have stopped and said, hey, what's going on?
Well, I don't think we should routinely physically assault people before we figure out what's happening in a situation in public.
Okay, would you also agree with me that we shouldn't routinely, as a citizen that carries a concealed firearm, walk up and confront people in parking spots?
I'll sustain the objection.
Now, when Mr. McLaughlin was told that there was an altercation outside, did he sprint down the sidewalk?
He crescendoed as he got to there.
Well, what does crescendo mean? How do you
Crescendo means I'll explain. Crescendo means as you took additional steps, he was getting faster to the point where he made the physical body check.
Okay. So, so when he comes out of the store, he's walking, and then it becomes a crescendo as Brittany Jacobs gets out of the vehicle.
I'd have to go back and look to see whether it's 2 or 3 steps or simultaneous with her opening the door.
Okay. But you'd agree with me that when he first left the store, he was just walking?
Yes. I think I testified that.
Because he really could have. You know, let me ask you this. If someone's in a store and they're told that there's an altercation outside, and they hear their loved one being in this altercation, it wouldn't be unreasonable for someone to put down their items and tear out the store and find out what's going on, right? That wouldn't be unreasonable for anybody.
So I assume that's what he did, and we may have all
Well,
done.
no,
But if you
well,
also
watch the video. That's not what happened.
You allow the witness to answer the question.
Sustain.
You just said that you assumed that's what he did. Okay, did you watch the video?
I did, and I'm saying without audio and without the ability to interview him, it appears that's what he did. I've stated multiple observations that were indicative of impulsivity and/or poor judgment and/or aggression, and I've stated the whole series that are common side effects of MDMA and MDA that appear consistent with what transpired in his actions.
I think my question to you was, if someone learned that their loved one was outside in an altercation, that it would be reasonable for someone to run outside.
Right, but you're mischaracterizing my testimony.
I'm not characterizing you.
You can allow the witness to answer the question.
Well, Your
I'm just
Honor,
trying to
You
say-
can allow the judge to make a ruling.
I'm arguing.
Well, yeah, he asked a question, okay, and then he answered it by, you're mischaracterizing my testimony, but he wasn't characterizing his testimony, right? So he just asked a question, so then you just answer the question. So what was your question?
Did a wonderful job making me forget my question.
Okay.
When I'm asking you questions, I'm not talking about your testimony. I'm just asking you questions.
I understand.
Okay?
It was the nature of the question.
Let's just go to the last part. Okay? The last thing that you were talking about was Marquise was having an adverse reaction to the MDMA because when he was shot, he went into the store, and that demonstrates to you what?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This has been asked at least 10 times.
We haven't even talked about this area yet.
No.
Can we approach, Judge?
So you're saying that Marquise McLaughlin had an adverse effect to the MDMA because after he was shot, he went into the store where he collapsed.
That was an observation that was a foundation for an opinion.
Okay? So what was wrong after Marquise McLaughlin was shot basically in his heart and basically began dying right there, what was wrong with him going to the store?
That if everything that was presented by counsel in the last series of questions was that he went out to protect his family, upon that, he retreated from his family and went back in the store. It's just an observation of judgment in a sequence or totality.
Okay. Well, you indicated yourself that when this defendant took out the firearm, you saw Marquise McLaughlin taking a couple steps back, and he couldn't go back any further because the car was there, correct?
I did.
Okay.
Not until that was brandished and he saw that, correct?
Okay. And while he's retreating, because someone has a firearm pointing at him, he actually turns to go back to the safety of the store, right?
And leaving his family, yes.
Okay. So you're saying that because of the MDMA, what he really should have done was turn back around towards the firearm and do what?
No, sir. I'm saying the totality of these is they display impulsivity, agitation, aggression, confusion, and altered perceptions. That issue was, at the time, he didn't know the severity of his injuries. He still had his girlfriend and 2 children in the presence and close proximity to someone with a firearm.
Okay,
And
so
we
he-
don't know, based on the last answer, that he was going in the store. He just started to turn his body.
Okay, so, and again, we're almost finished. So you're saying that when he shot basically in the heart, and he grabs himself, and he turns around and stumbles to the store, he doesn't realize the gravity of his injuries, the fact that he was just shot in the heart. That's what you're saying?
No, I'm sure he appreciates the gravity that he'd been shot, but many people are shot in the torso and the chest and had survived. I'm not, this isn't a debate over that injury. This is a debate over did his behaviors and actions show adverse side effects consistent with MDMA and MDA adverse side effects.
I don't have anything further.
All right, any redirect?
Yes, Judge. I will try not to be here that long. Dr. Buffington,
Yes.
the state has covered with you several areas. One in particular that I want to talk about is when the state was talking to you about the article titled Empathy and Aggression, about the 0 days, 4 days, and 7 days, correct?
Correct, survey.
All right. Now, did you have a chance in all of the documents that you read to read the deposition of Dr. Goldberger?
I did.
And in that deposition, did he reference that particular article of empathy and aggression?
He did.
And why is it that you were referencing that article of empathy and aggression that the state's doctor, Dr. Goldberg, referenced in his deposition?
Because as I previously stated, I thought it was inappropriate science to take a survey that was not controlled on the amount and what people took and only reassessed on day 4 and day 7 and give the impression that you don't have aggression until day 4. So there was mischaracterization or misrepresentation by using that as a basis. We know this medication has serious adverse side effects.
All right. So when the state says that you provided that article, is that an accurate statement that that was an article that you provided or that you used in any way, fashion, or form to come up with your ultimate opinions in this case?
When asked by opposing counsel during the deposition, did I read that article and did I use it? Yes. Did I say it was a basis for my opinion of the 2 opinions that I provided you? Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. Now, the state made mention about what your hourly rate is and how much you're going to get paid and who gets paid. And you spoke about the order. If I can, 1 moment. Do you have a copy, or have you seen the order that was authorizing your payment?
I have.
And I know you probably didn't want to say the reason why, but you can go ahead and say the reason why as to why that order was inaccurate. Why was the order inaccurate?
It's my understanding that it was a clerical error between your office and the court, and that it may be something that's remediable after or not.
Okay, so thank you for trying to save face for me, but there was an error on the part of my office with that particular order, correct?
Correct.
All right, and based on that, that's why you're not able to bill your normal rate of $400 because that order was incorrect,
That is correct.
due to my office's fault.
That is understandable.
Thank you. Can you tell me, just kind of briefly, what does a clinical pharmacologist do?
So a clinical pharmacologist is someone who is directly a specialist for primary care, for other medical specialists of any type, for prescribers of any type. That's not restricted to MD. And is the highest trained individual on pharmacologic matters, both the positive and the therapeutic attributes, but also the toxicities and adverse side effects. It is a specialist in the healthcare field for patients to refer to, self-refer, to provide integrated services in hospitals, interdisciplinary teams, or specialty practices. You may also be head of the pharmaceutical research at Merck. You may also be head of healthcare reform initiatives for patient safety. There's a wide variety of roles for a clinical pharmacologist in the field, but it's a medication specialist.
And along those lines, the state made reference to, you're just a pharmacist or something. Is there such thing as just a pharmacist? Like, what type of a degree does a pharmacist have?
So there is a licensure, like medicine, which has a clinical doctorate degree, doctor of medicine. There is a doctor of pharmacy, and that's a contemporary degree that is like medicine, except you don't do surgery. You don't train in surgery or direct intervention in terms of procedures. So with that, most of those curriculum tracks are actually simultaneous and integrated for med and pharm, but you end up with the highest amount of pharmacology training even over a physician or other prescribers.
The state also brought up the fact that, and they went over the times you testified for the state or you testified for the defense. Do you go out and seek the people who you testify for, or do they seek you? How do people
Correct.
get you?
I understand. So over time, I think it's people understanding your clinical interventions in different practice settings, your publications, your presentations at state and national meetings. So I think it's a reputation where an attorney or a judge, we have many referrals direct from judges to do evaluations of patients. Those individuals will find specialists in the field.
And are you governed by any type of licensing board or anything of that sort?
Absolutely, Florida Department of Health.
All right, and so as a result of that, can you just make up testimony from one part? And, what would happen if you were to make up testimony for a certain party? Could you lose your license?
Absolutely.
Okay, have you lost your license?
Never.
Are you still licensed now?
Yes.
You talked about testifying in a case. I think there was a little back and forth where it was testifying for the defense, but you were saying it was the state. I don't think you got to fully explain that. What case was that where you testified for the state, but they were actually listed as the defense?
So in the last few years, there's been a significant challenge for states to have access to various types of medications that are used in lethal injection protocols. I've been requested by various governors, attorney generals, state attorneys' offices to assist in answering for the court what the original medications in the protocols and also what the alternative medications, so their interchangeability and what their effects would be. In those cases, the state can become the defense. In other words, an inmate's attorney is suing the state for a request of a stay on their execution date.
Okay. And finally, with this video and the observations that you saw on this video, are you making any commentary on the parenting or the right or wrong of Mr. McLaughlin, or are you talking about the observations as it relates to the symptoms of MDMA? Can you talk about that?
No, I'm just stating that the observations indicate impulsivity, aggression, confusion.
Okay.
It's for the weight of the jury to value.
Okay, and not on the specific parenting styles or right or wrong, but just what those observations are as it relates to the effects of the MDMA in the system.
That is correct.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Your Honor, could I just have a couple, just to clarify three things?
Your Honor, we're going to object to.
Well, look, can we approach this so I can explain what it was?
Okay. Down. Thank you. All right. Members of the jury, I thought that I would give you a treat by only having one more witness at 4 o'clock, but obviously that did not happen. So it's 6 o'clock now. So I'm less optimistic than I was before, but I think there's a decent chance we can finish tomorrow. So that's good news and bad news. I guess the good news is that there's a decent chance we'll finish tomorrow. I guess the bad news is that the last thing you'll do is go back and deliberate, and that'll be Friday afternoon and possibly Friday evening, all depending upon how long it takes you to deliberate. As I said, on Monday, it could be a very short time, or it cannot be a very short time. So we can discuss that tomorrow, unless you have initial thoughts on that as far as completing the case tomorrow. I don't know if anyone had plans for tomorrow night, because I believe I indicated that my best estimate would be that we would get done on Wednesday. We would take off Monday, and then we'd be here Tuesday and Wednesday. But things are going, or at least they were going, quicker than we anticipated. So I don't know if you want any input on that now, or if you want to think about that and let me know in the morning, because I think you all relied upon the fact that we wouldn't possibly be here late on Friday. So is there any input at this point, or do you want to let me know tomorrow? Any input at all? All right. All right, do you want to go back in the jury room and discuss it, or do you just want to deal with it tomorrow? Okay, I'll tell you what. Go back into the jury room, think about if you want to deal with it today or if you want to deal with it tomorrow. If you want to deal with it today, give me any input that you want so we know what the situation is, because I know that you probably relied upon the fact that there wouldn't be the possibility of us being late tomorrow. So why don't you go back there, okay? And then as soon as you're ready, let the bailiff know, and then we'll get into that.
They just made a decision, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, and that's true for everybody, because I didn't know if you had your son's or daughter's birthday party or whatever tomorrow. So everyone's okay with finishing tomorrow if we can. Is that correct? Okay, if anyone's not, raise your hand. Okay, very good. All right, so have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8:45, okay? Thank you. All right, very good. So no one's going to want to do this, I'm sure, but it's just one of those things we have to do. We're going to have to go over jury instructions, at least initially, all right? And it's probably good if we take a little bit of a break, and then I've got a rough draft for everybody to look at. So I'll give those out, and then we'll take a bit of a break. Hang on. Your Honor, hang on. You prepare them, correct? I do. So I have a bunch here because there's a bunch of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7. Okay. All right, so if you don't mind handing those out, how long of a break do you want before we start talking about them?
15 minutes.
15? Okay. All right, we'll be back in 15 minutes.